What's up, streaming fam? Welcome back to the stream and happy Wednesday. I am so happy to be back with all of you guys. I'm so happy to be back in Florida. Let me just tell you, yesterday we didn't stream because I went and gave a speech to a big Christian high school in Modesto, California. Modesto was actually pretty great, but I had to fly in and out of San Francisco, aka what I like to call the pit of Satan's literal bedchamber, my least favorite city in the entire world. Maybe. It might be tied with some other ones. And it was just, when you fly into a place and there's just this level of spiritual darkness. Yeah, that happens every time I have to go in and out of San Francisco. But my speech yesterday went fantastic. Talk about a lot of reasons to have hope with about 300 high schoolers at Big Valley Christian School in Modesto, California. Just totally on fire for the truth, totally on fire for their faith. There are a lot of reasons to have hope out there, and I want you guys to have all of the confidence in the world in our generation because I see it every single day. But today is a new day. It's Wednesday, and I'm back in the free state of Florida. It's a great feeling, like a big breath of fresh air as soon as I landed after my red eye first thing this morning. And we have a lot to talk about on the stream today as it relates to several different subjects, but Election Day last night, the presidential debate coming up tonight here in Miami, which I will be attending in the flesh. So lots of good stuff to share with you guys tomorrow with some post-debate analysis. And then as this pertains largely going into 2024, how pro-lifers should be messaging when it comes to compassion for individuals, why we believe in protecting life for every single person, and just how strong the pro-abortion messaging actually is. Last night gave us a really great taste of that, particularly in the state of Ohio. Chat, anybody watching in Ohio, would love to see you guys speak up and introduce yourself. We're going to be breaking down Proposition 1, which just passed on the ballot in Ohio yesterday, what that means, what the larger implications of it are, and how it's going to shake things up for 2024. Before we jump right in, though, please do me a huge favor wherever you are watching and make sure you hit the like button on this stream. That could look like a little thumbs up or a little heart, depending on where you are watching. Ring the notification bell so that you always know when we are going live or uploading a new video. And most importantly, you guys know the drill. Smash that follow or subscribe button to make sure that you always know when we are going live and helping us continue to grow this very fun, independent streaming community. Take a second if you haven't already and use our live chat feature over on the side to introduce yourself. If you guys haven't already, let us know where you're watching from. If you have any fun debate watch plans tonight, or you're just a little sick and tired of politics, to be honest, I can totally understand that. And while you guys are doing that, before I say hi to some of you, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our amazing friends who are sponsoring this stream today, our friends over at Nori. I am super excited to be working with Nori, delivering the highest quality and most accessible microbiome solutions on the market. In my journey of detoxing literally everything in my life over the past few months, I've gotten rid of half of my clothes. I threw away most of my makeup and skincare and cleaning products. A huge part of my detox journey has also been understanding what's happening inside my body and going back to my roots of biomedical sciences, what I studied in college, to really prioritize the health of my immune system and my gut microbiome in particular. Nori's supplements and vitamins are all made right here in the USA with all ingredients backed by science and, most importantly, clean ingredients with absolutely no additives. I, for one, love their women's health probiotic. They have a great digestive health probiotic and supplement, but my absolute favorite product by far is their signature Stay Well drink mixer. It kind of works like an emergency packet, and if you guys travel a lot or you get sick a lot like I do, especially this time of year, the Stay Well product by Nori is amazing, and I cannot recommend it enough. It provides support for your immune system and your gut microbiome all at once. You can grab Stay Well or any other of your first Nori product. They have women's and men's specific health supplements as well from the link that I'm dropping right now in the live chat. And don't forget to use code Isabel20, 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 for a discount on your order. This is a great pro-family, pro-life, pro-freedom company made right here in America that I would love to see us all support and get the word out there for. So thank you guys so much, and thank you to Nori for sponsoring this stream. Let's kick things off over on Rumble, because we have our highest viewership over there to kick things off. You guys are the best, and we love to see our Rumble community grow. John is kicking things off for us in the chat. We've got New Jupiter and Magic Def watching. Craven, Chris, Tito, and Alfred are all present in our Rumble chat. Over on Locals, we've got African Warlord, Alex Padron, Crazy Cat Lady, Mountain Lover, Johnny Diamond, Tito Emrock, and more on Getter, Nitty Witty, and Ted from Ohio are kicking things off for us in the chat. And over on YouTube, Total Package, GFACT, and Dutch Canadian. Hi guys, great to see you, especially those of you watching from across the globe, including Los Ravosa. Great to see you here. We've got Obadiah and Ava watching. Ava says, I'm from Ohio, and I'm so appalled and deeply saddened by the outcome from yesterday. Ohioans, we got a lot to talk about today, so buckle up, and we definitely are going to want your inputs in the live chat throughout the stream today. Zach is joining us. We've got Todd and Joshua tuning in. Hello, guys. Great to see you. Gator Kellogg is here. We've got James, and I'm scrolling, Martha and Joe from Ireland. So many others. You guys are the best, and I love spending time with you every single day. We do have a bit of a hard out today because I have to go downtown to the presidential debate, which I'm super excited about. I actually got asked this time to be a guest of the Republican Party, so we'll see how that all goes. I'll be sure to share all of the stories with you tomorrow with our normal post-debate analysis. I'm super excited for that. But in the meantime, I want us to back up in time. Instead of focusing on what's happening tonight, tomorrow, and next year, let's talk about what happened last night on Election Day 2023. If you guys don't live in the United States of America and you happen to maybe live in Europe, I know we have a lot of Europeans, lots of Australians watching on the stream every day, you might not realize that last night was not really like an election of huge consequence for us. There were congressional elections that really mattered all across the country. There were some gubernatorial elections that really mattered for governor positions all across the country, but this was not a midterm election for the majority of Congress. And it certainly wasn't a presidential election where we see usually the highest turnout and usually the biggest initiatives happening all over the country. But Election Day of 2023 is typically a great forecaster for what's going to happen for Election Day of 2024 and can help predict some voter behavior that we are probably going to see happening going into next year. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but you guys have probably heard me say this over and over and over again at this point. You heard me say this leading up to the 2022 election. I am hugely concerned with a lack of solid messaging, particularly for young voters coming from the right. There is really no cohesive messaging or marketing strategy coming from a particular party on the right, if you understand what I'm saying. In fact, there's been a lot of kind of intentional efforts to alienate young voters, Gen Zers in particular, from the right with this idea that you're too stupid to know how to vote until you're 25, and so you would need to pass an extra civics test to prove that you can vote if you're between 18 and 25. I would be 100,000% on board with that if that was equally applied to everyone of every age. But instead, I think policies like that are almost intentional alienating all of America's soon-to-be biggest voter bloc in my generation. Gen Z is going to be the biggest group of voters as a single generation in 2024 and beyond. And it feels very odd to me that there's almost, like, this is just me being a conspiracy theorist, but there has been almost this seemingly intentional effort to alienate young voters and the issues that really matter to young voters. And I think one of the best examples of those issues is the topic of abortion, particularly in a post-Roe v. Wade America. But we see that on some other issues as well. We see that with social media use and the ban TikTok craze that really has nothing with banning TikTok and has everything to do with wanting to pass a new Patriot Act for the digital age. We see that with the environment, another great example where it doesn't matter what your political preference is, what party you think you would generally associate with. Gen Z lists environmental protection and conservation as one of our number one priorities and number one issues for any major election and any candidate. So there's tons of opportunities to get ahead of some of the biggest social issues that our country and our culture are dealing with every day. But generally speaking, in 2022, there was this massive prediction from the Republican Party that there would be something something called a huge red wave, a red tsunami, because everybody was sick and tired of the policies of Bidenomics. We were sick and tired of international conflict heating up and heating up and heating up. Obviously, we saw where that all ended up just a year later. And we anticipated that everybody was going to be so frustrated, namely by the lack of money in their pocketbook, the lack of money in their wallet, that there would be this huge red wave going into 2022. There wasn't. There wasn't a huge red wave going into 2022, largely because people didn't vote on the economy and they did vote on social issues. And I don't want to say that to make you think that Gen Z is this overwhelmingly leftist generation. We are actually not. And if you look at the exit polling data from 2018, 2020, and 2022, Gen Z is voting consistently in a straight line, more aligned with more conservative policies like ballot initiatives and more conservative candidates. So overwhelmingly, we're becoming a more conservative generation with every passing election. And don't take my word for that. You can go look up all of the exit polling for yourself. It looks exactly like a y equals mx plus b graph, pretty much the only thing that I remember from high school math, if we're being totally honest with ourselves. And it's not because Gen Z is overwhelmingly leftist or overwhelmingly this like blue-haired socialist scream at the sky generation. We simply have a different order of priorities with the issues we care about and are voting on. And sadly, most of the candidates from the right aren't even talking about those issues or are afraid to talk about those issues because they're worried about getting backlash, while the left is campaigning solely on those social issues. I always like to say that in 2022, the right was trying to convince people that your wallet was on the ballot in America, that your wallet was going to continue to suffer, and it is on the ballot for midterm elections. If you want to take things back from Bidenomics, you have to vote for the Republican Party in 2022, while the left was able to significantly convince people your life was on the ballot in 2022, that women were going to literally die if you didn't vote for the Democrat Party and for candidates who supported abortion, that kids were going to literally die if you didn't vote for the Democrat Party and candidates who supported overwhelming gun control, that we were all going to literally die because the climate is destroying everything. So while the right was able to convince people their wallet was on the ballot, the left was able to convince people that their life was on the ballot. And who do you think had a greater turnout and a much bigger punch to throw in 2022? It's hardly rocket science, and I'm sure we all remember that. So as we go into 2024, I find it unbelievably fascinating that we're kind of rinsing and repeating the same strategy from the right. We're almost afraid to talk about a lot of the social issues that are plaguing our culture as young people every day in America. Issues like trying to genetically and gender transition children as young as we possibly can through surgery, through hormones, etc. Issues like abortion, especially in a post-Roe v. Wade America. Issues like the environment, where I've only seen one question asked about that at any of the presidential debates, and basically nobody is talking about it. But these are the issues that truly matter to young voters, and young voters have a huge likelihood to be conservative on these issues if we're just willing to show up to the conversation. Showing up is half the battle, as my mom used to always say when I was growing up. But sadly, I think Republicans are doing this very bizarre, reverting back to pre-2016, where we have to be super polite and we don't want to talk about any controversial topics and we're just afraid to ruffle anybody's feathers. And so we would rather just not talk about it at all. But you cannot change anyone's mind if you're unwilling to share your perspective, to challenge somebody else's perspective, and to speak the truth in a truthless world. Similarly, we always say all the time here on the stream, you can never expect to change culture if you are not willing to go where culture is. And that's probably not going to be an immediate victory. That probably involves lots and lots and lots of patience, lots of continuing to just show up, because that is half the battle. But unfortunately, we're choosing not to show up at all. And then we blame young people for when we don't win, which is what happened in 2022. I believe, based on what happened for Election Day 2023 last night, that abortion is easily going to be the number one, if not in the top three, issues that will very much determine what candidates succeed in 2023. And that's not to say you have to be pro-abortion to be successful in 2024. That is not 2023. You don't have to be pro-abortion to be successful, but you do have to show up. You do have to be there at the table to have the conversation. You do have to defend your values and speak the truth in a world that's rejecting the concept of truth if you're hoping to incentivize or impassion or encourage anyone to show up to vote for you at all. We cannot play the your wallet is on the ballot game if the right is serious about making any major headway in a presidential election moving forward. A consistent, strong, value-based messaging on social issues is not just important, it is required to win any major national election moving forward, period, full stop. So on that note, and I'll give you some of my personal opinions on how we message the abortion issue from the right here in just a little bit, but I want to talk to you about what happened last night. Ohio made massive news yesterday because they had something called a proposition on their ballot, Proposition 1, that allowed the voters of the state of Ohio, which again, if you don't live in the United States, is a really big deal for this state because it is a huge battleground state, as we call it. So it very much oscillates back and forth between pretty liberal or pretty conservative, and it's always a battleground to figure out who's going to win the state of Ohio in a major presidential election or for the governor's race. Ohio has done some pretty conservative things lately, but last night they swung very much in the other direction with the pendulum, passing Proposition 1, Issue 1 on their ballot to enshrine a new, it didn't exist before, legal right to abortion in the state's constitution. So let's just break it all down and then kind of go from there and see how I think we can use this to try to gain back some points on the other side, but also just message true compassion and the truth to a world that really needs to hear it. This is from The Hill. They reported on this really late last night. They say Ohio passes Issue 1 ballot measure enshrining abortion protections. A ballot measure seeking to enshrine abortion protections in Ohio's state constitution is projected to pass. We now know that it did pass. The proposed constitutional amendment would protect access to abortion up until fetal viability, with exceptions for the life and health of the patient beyond that point. It is the first time that abortion rights advocates have been able to pass abortion protections in Ohio, a state that's trended increasingly red in recent years. Like I said, it oscillates back and forth between red and blue, between liberal and conservative quite often. But in Ohio, it now says abortion is legal up until 22 weeks, while the Ohio Supreme Court is weighing a 6-week ban that is currently on hold. That looks a lot like what the law in Florida, where I now live, looks like. Ohio became a flashpoint after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade last year, when there was a very, very unfortunate case of a 10-year-old who was a victim of rape. And she traveled out of the state to receive access to an abortion, which is not a medical procedure. I hate when they do this. There is no medical reason to have an abortion for the health of the mother. That does not exist from a scientific perspective. I have my degree in biomedical sciences. Any good OBGYN will deliver the baby, not kill your baby and then deliver your baby, and will fight as hard as they can for both the health and the life of the mother and the child. Earlier this year, The Hill said the state held an August special election where voters weighed a separate proposed constitutional amendment that would have required the threshold for voters to amend the state constitution to jump from a simple majority to 60%. This gained a lot of criticism. Ultimately, it was unsuccessful. So really what they needed last night to enshrine a legal right to an abortion in the state's constitution was a simple majority, not 60%. They were able to garner that yesterday. About 68% were projected to vote for this based on a poll that came out last month. And it looks like about 56% of Ohio voters, a little over half, did in fact vote for Proposition 1, Issue 1, the right to make the reproductive decisions amendment. So interestingly, if you read this, it says that it's going to protect access to abortion up until fetal viability. But if you actually read Proposition 1, what it truly does is enshrines a new right to an abortion, a right to end somebody else's life through all 9 months of pregnancy, pretty much for any reason. The reporting there is not very accurate. accurate, and they like to gloss things over and make it seem not so intense or not so controversial. But truly, you could theoretically have a right to end someone else's life in the state of Ohio for any reason at any time during pregnancy now, based on the passage of this proposition. It is so far in the other direction than what people anticipated the state of Ohio to be doing. And I think it's a really interesting commentary that the vote on this subject really came down to about 50-50. We're talking 56% for, 43% against. That might seem like a pretty overwhelming victory. It is not, particularly on an extremely controversial issue like this, where all of our media, all of our influencers, all of the entertainment industry, all of our politicians would have you believe that voters are overwhelmingly pro-abortion and that we live in this horrible dystopian society where this evil Supreme Court took away your constitutional rights. In reality, in a state like Ohio, which is a great indicator of what happens in presidential elections, about half and half had one position or another, believed you should have an abortion right for any reason through all 9 months of pregnancy, or who believed that was really not okay and not something that should be law in the state of Ohio. However, it did pass. This passed. So now this is enshrined in the state constitution in the state of Ohio, and likely will probably follow suit in other states now that we know this could be successful, based on what happened in Ohio, in other states across the country going into 2024. What the heck does all of that mean? That means in a post-Roe v. Wade America, since Roe v. Wade has been overturned by the Supreme Court through the Dobbs v. Jackson decision, as well as some others that weighed in on the influence there, and since we've had a country that treats abortion kind of like a checkerboard where each state gets to decide what's going on and each state is going to have their own policies, we probably are only going to see the fight from the pro-abortion side heat up significantly to, again, like we saw in 2022, convince people that their life is on the ballot, that women are going to literally die if they do not have access to an abortion, and that anybody who is uneasy with the idea of abortion for any or no reason through all 9 months of pregnancy, or even after birth, as we're seeing in the very gray area of some laws like California and Maryland and even Colorado, where I grew up, that is going to be the messaging coming from every single candidate, every single donor, every single endorser on the left side of the political aisle. Hugely coherent messaging. Sadly, on the right, we're still afraid to talk about it. And as we've seen in the last few presidential debates, we kind of tiptoe around the issue and everybody says, well, I don't know how I feel. This is how I personally feel, but that's not really what my official policy as president would be. I don't know. Just like live and let live, man. We have no coherent messaging strategy whatsoever. There is no cohesive position to defend life. And if anything, we continue to try to appeal to this idea of I won't take a moral stance on anything because we've allowed morality to become completely subjective. And I think most right of center candidates don't know how to reclaim any sort of moral position on this issue. So interestingly, in the last couple of months, since we started having presidential debates on every issue, but this one in particular, I've started to see this random number get thrown around of all Republicans should support only a 15-week abortion ban. I don't know where this number came from. It is not based on any sort of trimester cutoff. It's not based on any sort of fetal development cutoff, whereas if you heard about like heartbeat bills or heartbeat laws, that's based on when the child's heart is beating, when you can detect that on an ultrasound. This random number of 15 weeks starts getting thrown around randomly into the ethos of conservative politics, and most presidential candidates seem to be latching on to this number because they think that it's not too extreme, but also that it's strong enough that you can still call yourself pro-life if you're doing that. In reality, upwards of 90% of abortions happen before the 15-week cutoff that whoever is funding all of this messaging seems to be purporting. So you're not really a pro-life candidate if you're supporting a 15-week ban. But for whatever reason, wherever this messaging came from and whoever is paying for this and convincing politicians that this is a really good, sound, non-controversial cutoff, We're almost limiting ourselves as pro-lifers out of the gate in defending life by assuming other people are going to be hugely offended by protecting life, and by assuming voters are not going to support anything that's more protective of life, like our law here in Florida that is a heartbeat bill. But polling actually says the opposite. So again, like the young people thing, is this kind of an intentional shooting yourselves in the foot? I don't know. That's up to you to figure out. That's your tinfoil hat moment. But it just feels a little odd to me. Also from The Hill, reported in 2019, so this was way back several years ago, polling was already saying that the majority of Americans think that fetal heartbeat abortion bans, the heartbeat bill, a cutoff of about 6 to 8 weeks, it's usually in the 6th week of pregnancy, are not too restrictive. 21% of Americans think that's too lenient. Way too lenient, that it shouldn't be legal at all. 34% of Americans think that that's just right. So you can do the math. That's well over 50%. And only 45% of Americans thought it was too restrictive. So the polling doesn't support this idea of a wishy-washy, half in, half out, 15-week abortion ban. To the contrary, Americans are looking for strong moral clarity on this issue, and they are looking for a leader who is willing to tell the truth even when they think it's going to be unpopular. Newsflash, it probably won't be unpopular. Last spring, you guys probably remember, I traveled the country to speak on college campuses all across the country with my friend Kristen Hawkins, who is the founder and CEO of Students for Life of America. It's one of the largest pro-life advocacy groups in the country. They actually put something out a few weeks ago on the Students for Life Action. That's their 501c4 organization website that I also thought was hugely interesting regarding public support for protecting life. This was written by Christy Hamrick, who's great, on October 6th, and I can drop the link if you guys are interested. But they say that there are smoke screens in this area of abortion polling, that heartbeat legislation, cutting off abortion access when a child's heart can be detected, is actually a huge win, and that most people are pretty supportive of it. A recent USA Today, Boston Globe, and Suffolk University poll showed that among the pro-life generation, fighting for the earliest protections possible for life in the womb is hugely supportive. Reported in the Gannett News chain flagship, USA Today, the poll results were used to spin a story encouraging former President Trump to walk away from the pro-life issue and from heartbeat protection legislation. But let's check the math. Students for Life Action and Students for Life of America have long been champions for heartbeat protection, even calling GOP presidential candidates to pledge to sign a pledge that they put together called the Protecting Heartbeat Pledge, promising to sign such legislation if it makes it to their desk from Congress as the President of the United States. Kristen Hawkins has done a lot of work lobbying every major presidential candidate on this, including former President Donald Trump. But it's actually polling pretty much everywhere that supports this from American voters. An on-message poll in 2022 found that there was only a 1-point difference between support for a limit when a baby's heartbeat is detected or at almost 4 months of pregnancy, this random 15-week number that's getting thrown up. 1 point difference. That math is echoed by USA Today polling. USA Today reports, asked what the strictest limit on abortion they would support, 22% said restrictions at 6 weeks of pregnancy and 24% restrictions at 15 weeks. Another 1 in 5, 22%, were undecided. They're looking for more information on the subject, probably because literally everything is misinformation about this, and we can't honestly find good information because our media is so unbelievably twisted on all of this stuff. So what does that mean? Protections for children in the womb beginning at the universal sign of life, a heartbeat, polled about the same as limiting abortion much later at this random number of 15 weeks that all of these presidential candidates are all of a sudden latching onto, again, probably because of some lobbyist group that's funding their campaign. That's the same kind of data SFLA's Institute has consistently reported. Also of note, there is a lot of room for education. 1 in 5 people polled are not sure at all where they stand on this issue. And I think we assume, because it's so controversial and because it's it's so values-based and it's become so unbelievably polarizing, most people know how they feel about the issue of abortion. I can tell you from my personal experience speaking on college campuses all over the country, with all of the content that I do on social media, with these live streams that I do, and speaking to the mainstream media, most of my generation has kind of a loose idea how they might feel about the issue because of what's popular, because of what their favorite influencers might be posting, because of what they were taught in their health class in 6th grade. But if you're able to have an honest conversation, peer-to-peer, compassionate approach to compassionate approach, speaking the truth in love and bringing feelings into the conversation, as we often talk about needing that angle here on the stream when it comes to Gen Z, most people really don't know anything about the abortion industry in America. They couldn't tell you how an abortion procedure is performed. They couldn't tell you what that actually looks like or what that means. They couldn't tell you how that impacts the mental health or the financial stability or career prospects for women who obtain abortions later on in life. They can't even tell you what an ultrasound is supposed to look like because they're not shown what those look like on purpose when trying to come to a landing point from the left's approach on how to talk about this issue. There is massive room for education, and more importantly, even beyond just educating people who don't know anything, there's massive room to change people's minds on this subject from a place of compassion, from a place of truth, from a place of love, from a place of true empathy and feelings combined with facts that I think drives so much of the opinions of my generation. We are very much an empathy-first generation. We are very much a feelings-first generation, and I've found overwhelming success in talking to people about this when considering the stress and the struggle and the trauma that a mom might have gone through alongside what a child is going through. All of a sudden, you see this light bulb and this click moment in people's minds when you say, okay, let's talk about this reason or this reason or this reason. If you really care about a young woman in a situation of crisis, if you really care about a young woman who has been a victim of rape or incest or abuse or domestic violence, if you really care about a woman who's struggling with her mental health or struggling with lack of rallying of support in her own community and her own family, why would we want to add more trauma to their life? Why would we want to add more anxiety, more depression, more risk of suicide to this beautiful young woman's life? Of course we wouldn't want to do that. And we certainly don't want to put her physical life at risk, which happens every single time during an abortion procedure, surgical or chemical. We certainly don't want to be poisoning the environment, which is what we're doing when we're flushing abortion chemicals down the toilet, which is what happens in the vast majority of abortions today, chemical pill-based abortions at home. We certainly don't want trafficking of innocent children's body parts, which we know is happening in multiple situations across the country. We don't want women to have their uterus perforated and bleed out somewhere because someone was afraid to call an ambulance. We don't want any of those things. But what we do want is compassion. What we do want is empathy. What we do want is basic human rights and dignity for every single person. How can we find common ground on that? How can we find truth? How can we find empathy? How can we find humanity in one another moving forward? And I see more opportunity to change people's minds on this issue than anything else that I talk about. And yet, pro-life, supposedly candidates or conservative candidates or religious candidates for president seem to be so afraid to even show up to the conversation, to have a seat at the table. Showing up is half the battle. And if we refuse to show up, how can we ever expect to change culture and change policy in our country? Just as a reminder, my generation consistently lists this as one of our top 3 issues in why we vote, whether you support abortion or you don't. And again, the polling is much, much closer than you might realize for our generation. We are called the pro-life generation, the post-Roe generation, for a reason, because it's getting harder and harder and harder to argue with the actual science of what's happening in the womb. So if any generation is sure to make sure we change culture on the issue of life, it's sure to be Generation Z. regardless of where you fall on the subject, this is why we show up to vote. This is what motivates us, and this is what's going to get us to the ballot box next November. A Gallup poll reported that 1 in 4 Americans, mostly younger people, consider abortion a key issue in voting, and nearly half said that abortion was an important issue. Gallup noted for the GOP in particular, abortion should be a high priority. As Gallup notes, those who consider themselves pro-life are significantly more likely than their pro-choice counterparts to say they will only vote for a candidate that shares their values on this issue. The abortion issue potentially works more to the advantage of Republicans than Democrats, given the parties' respective platforms and the greater proportion of pro-life than pro-choice voters who will only vote for candidates who share their views on the issue. However, abortion may serve to mobilize voters to turn out more than it does to influence their candidate choice. So we need to be talking about it universally, regardless of who the candidate actually is, given the increasingly greater alignment of Republican and Democrat candidates with their party's position on abortion. I am never going to back down and be embarrassed about telling you guys that I am unequivocally pro-life. I will always 100% support any human being's right to exist because of any shared common human right. Our right to life is the most basic and fundamental of them all. We can never pretend to have rights to freedom of speech or rights to privacy or rights to defend ourselves if we can't all agree on our most basic human right, shared human right, the right to life. And I don't say that to be a Bible thumping over your head, you have to agree with me religiously individual. I don't say that to try to be on this supposed huge moral high ground and tell you that you're evil if you might disagree with me today on that issue. But I tell you this because in our broken world of a lack of compassion, of a lack of love, of a lack of respect for one another that's driving so many of the other horrible division movements in our country and in our world today, like this huge concerning rise of anti-Semitism in America and on college campuses around the world, like our inability to find the humanity in people who vote differently than us, like hugely concerning Christian and Catholic persecution all over the world that is slaughtering quite literally thousands of people that we are seeing because we can't find the humanity in each other. This is the basis for all of it. And if we're unable to stand up for the most vulnerable, the most defenseless in society, I don't know how it's possible for any of us, let alone if you're a presidential candidate or not, but any human being, to pretend like we can stand for morality anywhere else. If we can't support each other's right to exist, there's essentially no other opportunity to fight for any of our other shared human rights. And why politicians are so afraid of creating a moral consensus, of creating an opportunity to stand for what's right, even when it's hard, blows my mind. Long gone are the days where you speaking truth into a broken world means all of a sudden you're going to be cast aside and forgotten. People are hungry for meaning. We're hungry for truth. We are hungry for moral clarity, particularly from our leaders and those who seek to be president of the United States. So if I continue to hear nothing from any of these candidates, I remain pretty concerned about what that means for 2024 or any other major election moving forward. And even bigger than elections, our inability as a country and our inability as a movement to really rally behind strong messaging of compassion, of empathy, of shared humanity with one another is allowing the rhetoric of the pro-abortion side to fundamentally transform. Long gone also are the days where the messaging was safe, legal, and rare. We all hate abortion. Nobody wants this to become the norm. Nobody wants to celebrate abortion. We want to limit it as much as possible. Rather, we see movements like the Shout Your Abortion campaign. We see celebrities like Miley Cyrus licking cakes about being pro-abortion. And we've actually started to see in the last 6 months or so literal, demonic, and satanic conversations about abortion. The Satanic Temple in New Mexico, for example, has built an abortion facility to practice satanic child sacrifice rituals under protection of freedom of religion in the United States of America, in the state of New Mexico. And I'm seeing those who practice the occult, or those who might call themselves witches, start to talk about child sacrifice in the realm of abortion as well, largely on TikTok. Check this out.
How to practice abortion as a magical ritual. Part 1. My qualifications for teaching this: I am a witch who has had abortions and has used them as rituals. I've been through this twice. And it's birthing magic and death magic simultaneously. If you are a womb body who has made the decision...
I said this on my Instagram video of this. I haven't heard womb body before. I've heard birthing person. I've heard people who menstruate, people with a uterus. I've never heard a womb body. That one just, it makes me want to die. It gives me the ick.
Decision to have an abortion. Keep in mind that there is death and there is life. There has been a conception. There is life that has been conceived. For me, I look at the abortions I've had as workings. So just like you would go through a spell and do things in a very specific order, you would lay things out in a very specific order, because how we do our rituals and our workings and our spell castings, the order that we do them in is the order they play out in the physical.
This is like so gross. I honestly cannot believe this is a real thing. This girl is actually talking about performing abortions as a witch ritual. Ugh.
When the magic really kicks in and our spirits that we've called on say it's time for that working to work. So if we look at an abortion and conception ritualistically, there's a life that has been conceived. So what life, new life for yourself, are you conceiving? Maybe it's a new way of living. Maybe it's a new job, a new career. Maybe it's a new passion project. Maybe it's literally everything in your life changes. What have you been working towards and wanting and wishing for and praying for? Because that conception is a door. And when we open doors, we can ask for more.
It's giving Game of Thrones witch that sacrifices the child to try to save the other person. I don't want to give too much away if you've never seen Game of Thrones. Nope.
Have in mind what it is you're wanting to bring new life into the world for yourself, right? Because you're having the abortion, you're not actually bringing a new physical baby child life into the world, but you're bringing a new life for yourself. So we have that in mind. Well, you have that in mind. I've already done this. You have that in mind for your ritual. Second thing you want to keep in mind is that there is going to be an ending. You're calling death. You're calling ending to that conception.
Oh, God. This is just pray. Pray for this girl. Pray for her children.
Calling ending to that cycle of growth within you physically. You're calling there also to be a birth. Because from my perspective, how I think about this, is that once there's conception, no matter how developed that clump of cells is, whether it's, a couple weeks in or a full-on...
So I guess we're admitting that it's a baby now, by the way.
Baby. However that conceived cells gathering comes out of your body is a birth. An abortion, a miscarriage, a C-section.
Like I said, they're all admitting it now. This is what's being said every day. We're not doing the safe, legal, and rare thing anymore.
An actual birth of, a baby child. So there is life that you are birthing. Again, life, a new life for yourself, something new for yourself. But in that process, you're calling an ending. You're calling death to things. A death to growth of something that's been growing in your life that no longer serves you, that you don't want around. And for me personally, this has been very ancestral. I don't have enough time, so there's going to be a part 2.
Yeah, we're not watching part 2, obviously, because we want to hold on to our souls, but this is not the realm of safe, legal, and rare. Nobody wants to celebrate this anymore. GFAC says, at least the witch is honest. I mean, to some degree, yeah. So talk about an opportunity to change people's hearts and minds on this hugely important subject. Not a political subject, a human rights subject. Talk about an opportunity to move mountains, to protect the innocent in our society, to transform people's hearts, because the other side of the coin is getting crazier and crazier and crazier. What an amazing open door for the pro-life movement, for pro-life candidates, for pro-life leaders to say, we truly have empathy for you. We want better for you than the brokenness of this industry. We want better for you than trying to put your own life at risk every single time you do this. We want better for you than the horrifying environmental impact of the abortion industry. We want better for you than the years and years, decades of added trauma you are going to have to your life, of depression, of anxiety, of a 6 times higher suicide rate, according to one study out of Denmark. We want better for you than the occult. We want better for you than pagan witchcraft. We want better for you than the satanic temple sacrificing your child to worship Satan. Like I say on so many other subjects, this should be the easiest thing in the world to change people's minds. Like the issue of gender, like the issue of the environment, like the issue of everything else culturally that's going on in our country. It should be the easiest thing in the world to speak up, to change people's hearts, to grow your movement, to make an impact in society. But we have to be willing to show up to the conversation. We have to be willing to have a seat at the table. Showing up is half the battle. And I think as long as people are afraid of the backlash, they're afraid of sounding too intense or too controversial or upsetting anybody's feelings on this subject, the less likelihood we are going to have of an opportunity like this again. My hope and my prayer is that whatever ends up happening out of this very crowded, super confusing Republican Party primary going into 2024, there's an opportunity to take on leadership from a position of common morality and goodness and truth on these social issues. Not just abortion, but chief among them, abortion. Because we no longer operate in a country where shared moral values are part of the American experience. We no longer operate in a country where we can have a sound moral judgment and sounding board in our media or from our professors or even from many of our pastors, unfortunately. We no longer live in a country where we can reasonably expect that the truth is always going to be out there with every single Google search. It's not. In fact, for kicks and giggles, as soon as you get off of this stream, go Google who can menstruate, and I promise you'll want to pull your hair out and just punch yourself in the face. We are desperate for a time in politics, in culture, in the church, everywhere, for strong moral clarity, for leaders that are willing to stand up and fight for what is good and what is true, even when it's difficult, even when you think that it might come at your own detriment. I don't think it will, by the way. I think it's only going to come to your positive outcome of that, because people are looking for strong moral clarity and leadership. We are desperate for people who are willing to make this less about their ego, less about their image, less about their campaign, and more about how they can serve others. And there's no more noble way to do that than by giving a voice to the most vulnerable, voiceless people in our society, to preborn children who don't have an opportunity to speak up for themselves, but who are dying in greater numbers than any other conflict we waste our time talking about to get airtime on social media or the mainstream media and cable news. This is the single greatest human rights issue of our time. It's easily the single largest genocide that's ever occurred in human history, and we love to talk about genocide and how we can prevent that. If we're not doing it here, I cannot expect any political, cultural, church, any leader to fight for it anywhere else. So, show up. I guess that's my message, and I'm eager to see what happens tonight at this debate. Show up. Have a seat at the table. Be willing to have the conversation. Be willing to stand for truth, even when it's hard. Create a new set of moral common ground for American citizens moving forward. Create a common moral culture for us to live through again. Set the standard, not as a race to the bottom for our country, but of what we can accomplish if we are willing to do what is right, even when it's hard. There are countless stories of greatness and beauty and truth and morality in our nation's history and our world. And sometimes those people don't get recognition in the moment, but sometimes they do. Think of people like Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, people who were willing to do what is right at that time, even if they thought it would cost them their political career, and how we venerate those people now, decades later. I pray that we can come to a time in American politics where it's more than how many clicks can I get on my ad? How can I make fun of somebody's shoes? How can I get the own the libs moment on the debate stage or on Twitter? And we can raise the bar for what it means to be a servant leader of American citizens again. I don't know that we're there in 2024, and it's kind of exhausting pretending like we are, so I will always tell you the truth when I'm frustrated and when I don't see a lot of opportunity to win. You guys can count on me for that. You did in 2022, and we'll be honest about it in 2024. But there's still time. There's still time to fight. This is not over yet, and I've said it many times. I don't think we even have a full picture of what this election is going to look like quite yet with our candidate choice on the right or the left. So, not to be totally cryptic there, but don't give up just because you think other people are going to look down on you because of it. We're going to be hated by this world if we tell the truth. We're going to get backlash. We're going to get the name calling. We're going to get fired from our jobs or kicked off of social media. But what are we fighting for? Followers? Donations to our presidential campaign? The opportunity to sit in the Oval Office? The opportunity to call yourself president? Or are we fighting for the moral clarity and the soul of this nation moving forward? That's a question everybody has to ask themselves, especially those on the debate stage tonight and moving forward. I can't answer it for them, but I pray that there's some stirring in their hearts to answer that question correctly. All right, you guys, I got to go downtown to Miami for the debate. I hope that was helpful and interesting in terms of analysis on the pro-life messaging going into 2024. Show up, be willing to speak the truth, and actually believe the polling. Don't convince yourself you're going to struggle if you stand up for what is right. We will see how all of this shakes out tonight. We're back tomorrow for some post-debate analysis. Super excited to share all of that with you guys. And we're joined by Joe Bob on Friday for Friday Funnies. Thank you guys so much for your patience yesterday as I was traveling in California. And before you go, just as a reminder, this week I made a huge announcement that I am co-hosting Dave Rubin's new Monday through Thursday daily show on Rumble. So all of you Rumbleites watching, I'm going to call you that. I just coined that phrase as we started talking. And you Locals people watching on Rumble and Locals every day at 1 p.m. Eastern. Dave Rubin and I are hosting a show called People of the Internet, where we are using Rumble's brand new studio streaming software with a live call-in feature from all of you guys. We're working on getting all of my followers the opportunity to tune in, but for right now, in the first week or so, we're playing with just Dave's community members. So stay tuned. We're going to get there for you guys. We would love to have as many of you guys call in as humanly possible. In the meantime, you can tune in every day except Friday, Monday through Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern on the Rubin Report, Rumble, and Locals. And then later on Tenet's Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble, new conservative media company that we're really excited to be working with for People of the Internet. I saw a lot of you guys watching today, and I'd love to see you guys there tomorrow as well. Before you guys go, please do me a huge favor and hit the like button on this stream. That might look like a little thumbs up or a little heart. Ring that notification bell so that you always know when we are going live. And most importantly, smash that follow or subscribe button to help us grow this community one day at a time. Love you guys so much. We will be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern.